So ChatGPT has been banned in Italy, and this is raising a lot of questions about why it happened and what this is going to mean for the future of AI chatbots, Bard, and all of these others, in addition to ChatGPT itself, where things are going for this company with this ban, etc. So today, let's get into it. How is this Italian ChatGPT ban going to affect the company and AI in general in the coming days, weeks, months, and maybe even years? We're going to talk all about that right now. My name is Trent Kennelly. I'm a Web3 marketing strategist, and this is the best place for you to learn about Web3, NFTs, AI, and how to market it all. So if that sounds good to you and you're excited, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to my channel if you're into it, comment to let me know what you think about this ban or even what you think about AI in general. I would just kind of love to get your thoughts about this whole idea and surrounding all of these bans and everything. Please let me know in the comments and let's get started. All right, so why is ChatGPT banned? There's one simple answer, and that answer is GDPR. So the GDPR, also known as the General Data Protection Regulation, is this rule that's been on the books in Europe since around 2017. And what it basically says is that you as a company cannot acquire and use the personal data of people in the European region without the consent of those people. So I cannot acquire Joe Smith's information, their data, without them saying, yes, you have the permission to acquire it and to use it. Okay, you have to be able to show that there is a consent behind it. But it goes a little bit deeper than that. So let's try to understand this on a more granular level before we move on to specific ChatGPT issues here, okay? The GDPR is a data protection measure that's intended to make sure that nobody is using your data in unethical ways. So for the biggest example of unethical use of your data, Cambridge Analytica, right? We've all heard about this scandal. That's a scandal in which Meta, also known as Facebook at the time, was selling highly detailed information about users to Cambridge Analytica and other parties that were its biggest power users. So just to give you a little bit more perspective on that, as a Facebook advertiser, you are and have always been able to get an X amount of information. So you can't go super deep. I was never able to say, okay, well, what is dandogfood@gmail.com visiting from day to day? Couldn't ever get that information. But Cambridge Analytica could, because they spent enough money with Meta or Facebook at the time for them to be interested in continuing that relationship and cultivating a higher level of payment and quid pro quo there, okay? So the GDPR, it wasn't kind of in response to that. That was more of a US issue than anything, but it is something that had that scandal occurred mainly in Europe, it would have led to even more massive fines and punishments than what happened in the US. Now, it could still be under investigation here. I don't know. I haven't tracked that in a little while, but it just goes to show that the GDPR is one of those things that is meant to protect against issues that come up like that. What that means is that companies who want to use your data have to store it in the right way, and they have to ask your permission before they can use it in whatever way that they want. So to put this in more real world terms, there are two places online that you've most often seen this. The first is on any website that you visit, okay? You're constantly seeing this pop up like the one I'm showing you right now, begging you to acknowledge that you're okay with cookies being put on your computer for tracking purposes. So they want to be able to track you across the internet, and you have to assent to that tracking. That is a data regulation directly from the GDPR. The other place is in the email arena. So years ago, if an email marketer wanted to send you a sales or marketing email, they just got your email by whatever means necessary, and they sent you emails until you went insane. And the rules around this have restricted advertisers' ability to send you spam emails like that over the years, and the GDPR is just the most restrictive one of these, okay? So now email marketers have to get clear approval from you, the user, before we can send you marketing emails. And that's the rule. It's clear approval, which is why most of the time we're trying to get you to double click that, yes, actually you are very interested in getting these marketing emails, which is why you'll sign up for a newsletter or an ebook or something, and then you'll get an email that says, are you sure you really want to do this? And then you click on the button in the email, and then you get your ebook or your newsletter sign up on the web page after you've clicked the second time. That's so that marketers can come back at any point and say, yes, you actually were interested in this because you affirmed 2 times that you were interested. And all of this really does surround data protection at the end of the day, because whether you realize it or not, you as a company, no matter how big or small your company is, absolutely hold data from users that have visited your site or interacted with your site or you in any way, right? And it really is our responsibility to be more intentional about how we use that data. That's just what it comes down to, whether you want to admit that or not, okay? So the question is, in this case, how is OpenAI failing this data protection requirement? And that's kind of up for debate. According to the Italian Data Protection Authority, the reason is related to the ChatGPT outage of March 20th, 2023. Now, I have no doubt that when I give you that date, you have no idea which outage I'm referring to. I mean, in the first few months of ChatGPT's life, it was constantly down and they just could not keep the servers up because the demand was so incredibly high. But Italy is claiming in this specific breach that user data was exposed. So there's no news yet as to how true that is, but OpenAI is of course refuting that claim. So we'll have to see how that goes. So all that said, we don't have a lot of information about this specific ban yet, but it still does raise a few questions. Is this the only country that's going to ban ChatGPT? How is Bing going to be affected? I mean, Bing's AI chat is based on ChatGPT, right? How is this going to affect AI in general? I mean, what is the after effect here? What's the shockwave, right? These are all kind of big questions, so let's run through them in a bit more detail. Starting broad, let's touch on how this is going to affect AI generally. And the truth is twofold. So first, this is a real wait and see moment. But at the same time, almost all new technology involves government regulation, fear, and user adoption issues. They always do. So this isn't new, but it is often a hurdle to be overcome. Just look at blockchain and blockchain currencies. They're still going through a constant legal and ethical discussion. It just never seems to end. Yet something like 16% of people in the US are invested in crypto. So the law is always going to step in and regulate something. It's just a question of what that's going to look like right now. So while this is by no means the death knell for AI, that doesn't mean that it should be ignored. I mean, the fact is that in this case, they're not even attacking ChatGPT for its AI capabilities anyway, right? They're actually identifying a problem with OpenAI's use of personal data as it relates to GDPR. So you could almost even make an argument that this is a non-issue when it comes to AI. And in fact, Matteo Salvini, the Deputy Prime Minister of Italy, has said something kind of similar. He's called the decision disproportionate and hypocritical. So next question, is this the only country that's going to ban ChatGPT? And I mean, that's kind of up in the air right now. We can kind of see the world's reaction to Italy taking this step. They're considering taking the same step in other countries. It's not really clear what that means for them, but there's also a lot of negativity and criticism surrounding this decision. But nobody has come out and said, yes, this is the right thing to do, ignoring countries like Russia and North Korea and Syria who are banning it based on ideology. Okay, so that really doesn't apply to what we're talking about here. Okay, what we're really talking about is that, yes, data protection is very important, but a lot of these countries are asking whether this OpenAI issue is really the case that we need to be making an example out of, or if we should be finding a case that has more impact if there's something else that we really need to be looking at here. And then finally, how are Bing and other AI chatbots going to be affected here? So right now, it doesn't look like any of those have really been touched because again, this seems to stem directly from a specific data breach incident from an outage of OpenAI's ChatGPT on March 20th, okay? So this is kind of not really related to AI in that sense, but it's also a testing ground, right? So if we see that this ban stays in place for a long time and they tie it more closely to AI in some way, then that could create a domino effect that's going to have a negative effect on the industry more generally. We're just going to have to see. I mean, just consider that in order to communicate with you about the topics that it does, using its natural language style and everything, it's had to intake millions of articles, videos, images, and other information about us. It requires a lot of data to get an AI model like this to the point that it has reached. But whether that data needs to be personal data, I really hope not. Nonetheless, with all that information being fed to the model, it is bound to snap up some personal information as well. Not that that's a good thing, but it probably has happened. So at the end of the day, what does this really mean? At most, I'd call it a minor inconvenience. I really don't see a lot of other countries following suit here. And if they did, they'd need to start attacking a bunch of other companies in a much harsher way than they have. Yes, there seems to have been a data breach issue in March, but there have been far worse data breach violations before by other companies that haven't resulted in such a harsh reaction. That doesn't make any data violation okay, but if we're going to issue punishments that are this harsh, we need to have some consistency to how that punishment is doled out. So there's the lowdown. It's annoying for people in Italy, but ultimately, I don't think it's going to play out to be something super painful, and I think it'll probably be reinstated before too much longer. So let me know what you think about this ban, what you think about AI in general. I would love to get your thoughts. Otherwise, make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel if you're into it, and I will catch you in the next one.